Hey, I'm Sammy. Welcome to my kitchen. Living in New York with rent to pay and little time to cook elaborate meals, I've learned I can't afford to let leftovers go to waste. Let's discover how to make the most out of the stuff we already have in our kitchen. Because you know what? Everyday ingredients are really exciting. Let's cook a meal and then reimagine that meal so we've used everything we bought. Let me show you how easily you can make everyday gourmet. Hey guys, today we're going to combine all of my favorite things into one dish, fried porky goodness. In other words, pork schnitzel, which is basically just pork chops pounded really thin and breaded and fried. I've got some center cut pork chops. I found some with a little bit of dark meat on there, which is just more flavor and delicious. So if you can find that, I would highly suggest it. They're boneless, so you don't have to worry about pounding through a bone or cutting it out. I've got some wax paper here. Pound it to about 1/4 of an inch. And this is a great way to get out all of your frustration, starting from the center and just kind of hitting it outward. You want to go pretty gently because you're not trying to like massacre the meat. You're just trying to like ease it out with a little force. See, look, beautiful. Pretty thin, right? That's gonna cook in no time. So now we're gonna bread the pork. And I've got my breading station all set up. Meat goes into flour, goes into egg, goes into breadcrumbs. I put salt and pepper in the flour and in the eggs just a little bit because I want everything that touches the meat to have seasoning. You need to season your food. In the breadcrumbs, I added a little bit more. I added some rosemary for a little herbaceousness as well as some parsley, some lemon zest for a little bit of freshness, and then onion powder and garlic powder, just kind of driving all of the flavor home. We're gonna season our meat, again, always seasoning. A little bit of salt and pepper. Other side. I have a dry hand and a wet hand. My dry hand's gonna be my dominant hand because I'm gonna use it more, but I don't wanna get wet on dry because then you end up with like monster gross fingers. And the flour. Pat off all of the excess. You're just getting a really thin layer of flour. Wet hand into the egg. So the egg mixture is also mostly eggs. There's a little bit of milk to thin it out, but the egg is really what's going to adhere the breadcrumbs to the meat. So that's a big deal. Some people water down the egg mixture too much, and it's really the egg that you're gonna want. Now you'll notice that I'm using panko breadcrumbs. They're Japanese style. I like the way they crisp up. They're a little lighter, it's a little flakier. If you have regular breadcrumbs, use them. Don't worry about finding panko. So I'm also making sure that I actually push the breadcrumbs into the meat. This is why my dad always makes me bread anything whenever I go home. His breading just falls right off. I think he waters down his egg mixture a little too much too, but he doesn't take the time to really like press the breadcrumbs into whatever he's breading, and he doesn't have the patience for that. So I do it. And there you go. Beautiful. See, it's not falling off. You can still kind of see the meat, but you're gonna get a really nice crust on that when we put it into the oil later. So when I was probably like 7 or 8, I went and stayed with my Aunt Terry and Uncle Larry for like a long weekend, and we went to Six Flags. But in the meanwhile, we breaded and fried some fish, and she was the one that told me about the egg mixture and how she was like, you're putting too much milk in there. And I was like 7. And she's telling me I'm putting too much milk in my eggs. But yeah, she was like, well, you know, the egg is the biggest factor in having all of this stick to it. And if you put too much milk in, the breadcrumbs are gonna fall right off of the fish. We've breaded our pork. We're gonna start on our veggies. We're gonna do pan roasted Brussels sprouts with a little bit of bacon and cranberry and walnuts. So let's get all of that chopped and ready to go. I have about a ½ pound of Brussels sprouts here. I've already trimmed the bottom and halved them. They're all washed and beautiful. Brussels sprouts are just like mini cabbage, but better. They're so delicious. I didn't like them at first, but then I figured out a way to make myself like them, and now I love them. And my secret is bacon. So we're gonna put our pan on medium-high heat. We're going to just render some bacon. So I've chopped it up into little, these are called lardons, all of the bacon. So we're gonna render the fat. So I keep saying render, I just mean we're gonna brown it and let the fat seep out of it. I use bacon fat all the time because it's free fat and free flavor, and bacon is delicious. So if you're scared of vegetables, put bacon in them and they'll taste more like bacon than vegetables, and then you're tricking yourself into liking vegetables. It's probably how I'm gonna raise my children. This isn't gonna take that long now that the pan's hot, but you wanna keep moving them around because you don't want them to burn, because burnt bacon is sad bacon. Now that all of the bacon is crispy and perfectly golden brown and delicious, we're gonna take it out, keeping most of the grease in the pan because we're gonna use that. All right, and then we're gonna go right in with the Brussels sprouts. Get them all coated, a little bit of salt, pepper, and some spicy stuff. I'm gonna let these go. Now's the time when I get really excited about getting involved in my food and I just wanna shake the pan all the time. Don't do that. So you want the Brussels sprouts to have as much contact with the bottom of the pan as possible. That's the only way they're gonna caramelize, so leave them alone. Go get a glass of wine or make a cocktail or something, and that's a good idea. And they're brown, so they're gonna be caramelized and delicious. I love balsamic vinegar. It's a little bit tangy, it's really sweet, it's kind of syrupy in a delicious way, and this is just a nice way to get anything that has stuck to the bottom of the pan off, and also glaze the Brussels sprouts and give them a little bit more sweetness. So I turn the heat off. I'm gonna chop up some walnuts. We're gonna add those and a little bit of the cranberries. The walnuts are gonna give it a little bit, obviously, nuttiness, a little earthiness. And I just like the walnuts against the bacon and the cranberries. And we're also putting walnuts and cranberries in the salad, so everything's kind of gonna have the same flavor. So the walnuts are gonna toast up a little bit in here, kind of get the oils out. I didn't wanna toast them ahead of time because this is gonna give them enough heat. Cranberries. Put the bacon back in. Warm all that up. All right, so this is called QCing. It's my dad's excuse to eat his food before it's ready, just to make sure it's ready, because it might not be seasoned enough. And it is. It's perfect. All right, so these are done. Plate those. Perfect. And if you want, you can always just toss these in a preheated oven at like 250 and they'll just stay warm. You can cover them if you want them to, if you don't want them to get too much more brown, which we don't. So, let them hang out. We'll move on to salad land. We're gonna do a mixed green salad. So I like the mixed greens because they're light, they're fresh. It's a nice contrast between the crunchiness of the pork. And they're a little bitter, which will go nicely with the cranberries, and we're gonna put some apple in here. So that's my salad of choice. First, I'm going to toast some walnuts for our salad. You don't need any oil when you're toasting any kind of nut. You just wanna use a dry pan, low heat, because these won't take long at all, and last thing you want are burned nuts. Okay, so these are just about there. They're slightly more golden. So you can see they've gotten a little more golden. Some of them are a little almost black. That's perfect. I can smell them. They're done. So I'm just gonna give them a chop. And they are hot, so be careful. I'm gonna chop all of these because I am gonna use them later, so I might as well just chop them now. I'm gonna put a little bit of apple. I'm using a Granny Smith. There's a little bit more bite to it. It's a little bit sour. I prefer that against the pork. Use whatever kind of apple you want. And I'm just gonna quickly dice them. You can peel it. I'm not gonna peel it. I don't mind having the chunks of apple. I don't mind the skin. If you mind the skin, peel it. I'm also gonna put some cheese in the salad, and cheddar cheese is my favorite cheese. It reminds me of home. It reminds me of being a kid. And it goes really, really well with apples. This is a lovely pairing. I have a really sharp cheddar cheese here. It's gonna be crumbly just slightly. It's a little bit drier. And I'm not gonna dice it because I don't want it to be too close to the apples, and I want it to have some texture. So I'm gonna take the tip of my knife and just kind of break it off like that. So you have a little bit of, they're a little craggy, they're not perfect, but it's a nice chunk of cheese. So it's gonna stand up to the other textures we have going on in the salad. It's not gonna get lost. I'm gonna do a really bright, really acidic dressing with this. I'm gonna use red wine vinegar. It has a good bite to it. It's not gonna be too sweet. But to counter that, I'm gonna add a little bit of honey. So I have some minced shallots here. Perfect. Mash some garlic. I'm gonna use about half of this. Again, with the frustration. Get that out banging garlic too. So I'm gonna use the salt as an abrasive and make a paste out of the garlic. It's gonna just incorporate that much more nicely into the salad dressing. Chop it up a little bit. A little bit of vinegar. 3-to-1 oil to vinegar. So if I'm gonna add a tablespoon of vinegar, I'm gonna add 3 tablespoons of oil. I'm just kind of eyeballing this. It's probably good. A little salt, pepper. Mix that together. Add a little bit of honey. Like I said, the honey's gonna cut through the vinegar. So my cousin is a chef in LA. She's a kitchen coach, she calls herself. She's the kitchen coach. Hey, Tori. So she teaches her clients how to basically stock their house to make their lives easier. And one of the things she teaches is a vinaigrette right up front. She's like, do you have a mason jar? Do you have olive oil? Do you have lemon? Lemon, olive oil, shake, 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 dressing. Why would you go out and buy dressing when you can just make it this quickly at home? So I'm using really good quality olive oil. I'm just gonna drizzle and whisk. Oh, perfect. Actually, it's a little sweet. So add a little bit more vinegar. See, my dad claims that no one ever does that on TV. They're always like, taste, it's perfect. And I'm like, it's not perfect. I'm not gonna lie to you. It's needed some more vinegar. So see, you tweak and you taste and you tweak and you taste. So taste again. Yes, much better, much more balanced. It's a little sweet, it's a little acidic. It's perfect. So I've got my salad ready. I think it's cocktail time because I'm getting thirsty. So let's make a cocktail. There's a little bit of rosemary in the pork. We have some nice herbs. So I wanted to do something light and fresh because we're gonna fry the pork. So I'm gonna do a gin cocktail. It's gonna be a little gin fizz. The twist I'm gonna add is I'm gonna do a rosemary honey. So what I've done is I've taken some honey, added a splash of water just to thin it out, heated it up, and then steeped a little bit of rosemary in it. So for this amount of honey, I used about half a sprig. About that much, because it's really potent stuff. So just heated that on the stove, covered it, and then let this steep for like 15 minutes. My little shaker here. Add about a half an ounce of our rosemary honey syrup. And I'm gonna use grapefruit. It's obviously really acidic. It's not too sweet. We've got the sweetness from the honey. I'm gonna add 3/4 of an ounce of this. It's bright, it's fresh, it goes really nicely with the gin. Lengthen out the gin a little bit. I'm gonna add some dry vermouth. Add an ounce vermouth, and vermouth is just fortified wine. People are scared of vermouth, probably because people store it on the back of their bar instead of in their fridge. So if you've had a martini with vermouth and you're like, that's gross, it's probably turned wine, which no one wants to drink. So keep your vermouth in the fridge, it'll last longer. Add an ounce of gin. So the gin has a lot of herbaceous notes to it, mostly juniper, which is a really nice kind of piney, Christmassy, warm flavor, and the rosemary has a lot of those same elements, so it's going to work really, really nicely. Some ice. Top it off. So when you're shaking in a shaker like this, you always want to have the smaller guy towards you, because if you're shaking professionally and this flies off, and it has, you're not going to hit a guest in the face. So I'm going to strain this over some ice into kind of a fizz glass. Then I'm going to top it with a little club soda, give it a little effervescence, thin it out a little bit, lengthen it. Don't drink this with a straw. It'll go by much faster. And then just to show everybody what we've put in their drink, just a little rosemary sprig with a little grapefruit wheel. Just make it pretty. And then you could serve these at a little garden party, and it's delicious. Yep. The honey's the right amount of sweetness. The vermouth is there. The gin has a little bit of spice at the end. The grapefruit's a perfect vehicle for that. I think we're ready for some pork. So I've got some canola oil going in the pan. We're gonna do a shallow fry. A shallow fry as opposed to deep fry. Less oil, shallow pan. I'm only doing 2 at a time because that's as many as the pan will fit without, you never want to overcrowd a pan because then you're going to steam everything. So while that's going, let's make the sauce for the pork. All right, so I'm going to make a honey mustard sauce. It's a little bit of mayonnaise, just to give it a little bit more body and a little bit more creaminess. I'm using 2 kinds of mustard. I'm doing a whole grain mustard because I like the texture of it. If you don't like whole grain mustard or can't find it, don't worry about it. You can use whatever kind of mustard you like. I'm also going to use some Dijon mustard. It's got a little bit more spice to it, and it's just what I prefer. Obviously, a little bit of honey. Watching the pork. A little bit of salt. A little bit of fresh ground pepper. Then I'm going to add a little bit of lemon juice to like add an extra zip to it, a little bit more acidity. And I really just eyeball all of the amounts of these kinds of things. Ooh, pork is ready to flip. Get it? Be very careful, lots of oil. Ooh, yeah. Look at that. There it is. Look at that. Perfect. So good. And I like to use tongs for this instead of a spatula because you have more control over the fried pork, which has a lot of grease on it. That took no time, and the pork is going to stay juicy because it's so thin and it was on the heat for so little time. It's not going to be dry. I'm going to hit it with a little bit of salt and a little bit of lemon. It's so good. Did you hear the crunch? Next up, we're going to reimagine all of this, and guess what? I'm going to turn this salad into a grilled cheese sandwich. So so we're gonna make one of my favorite things. One of the things I've made for probably the longest. It was probably the first thing I ever made, was a grilled cheese sandwich. The cheddar cheese that we used for the salad, since it's so sharp and so oily and not really creamy, I'm gonna pair that with a creamier cheese. This is fontina cheese. So I'm gonna grate both of those. I'm just gonna go about half and half on the cheeses. So I'm gonna make 2 sandwiches, because who doesn't want 2 sandwiches? I'm gonna grate a lot of this cheese. You don't need the rind. You can use Gruyere cheese too, that kind of has a similar creaminess. This is one of my Zen moments in the kitchen. So my cousin, the kitchen coach, she says applesauce is her Zen moment. She just loves to make applesauce and peeling apples. I love grating cheese. I'm going to use the rest of that apple that we didn't use for the salad. I'm just gonna slice that super thin, and we're gonna layer that in with the cheese. And apples and cheddar are just so classic. Anybody ever put cheddar cheese on apple pie? My grandmother used to do that. So now I'm gonna kind of make a little crumble out of the walnuts and the cranberries, and I'm gonna layer that in between the cheese and the apples, and the more cheese and more apples and more cheese. More cheese, really. So I'm gonna chop them up all together. It's gonna be more of a crumbly, pasty thing going on. All right, so you see how it's kind of crumbly and a little bit sticky? That's gonna be great because it's gonna stick together in the sandwich. So now we're ready to go. I'm gonna take some of that honey mustard sauce. I'm gonna spread it on the inside of the bread. A little tang, a little creaminess. So the key to a grilled cheese sandwich is the layering. And I love grating my cheese as opposed to slicing the cheese. I think I have found you get a more even melt on the sandwich. Cranberry walnut crumble in here. And see, this is gonna also, like, because it's so small, it's gonna seep into the cheese. The cheese is gonna really just melt around it. So I'm just layering the apples really, really close together, kind of on top of each other. They're gonna steam a little bit, and they're gonna kind of melt into the sandwich as well. And then a little bit more cheese on top. So you'll notice I've also not buttered the outside of my bread, because I believe in grilled cheese now, not grilled cheese when the butter decides it's time to be spreadable. And you know how I deal with that? Just melt the butter in the pan. The key to cooking a grilled cheese is low and slow. The worst thing to happen to a grilled cheese is to have burned bread and cold cheese. So I'm going really, really low, really slow, because this is also a pretty thick sandwich. And I want to make sure that the heat actually gets through all of the cheese into the apples before I flip it. So I'm going to actually take these out. Look at all the layers in there. Look at that. With the cranberry, the walnut, the apple. There's a little bit of sweetness, a little tanginess from the honey mustard. The cranberries add a little bit of that, like, concentrated sweetness. The apple's really acidic and bright. The bread's perfectly toasted. It's a perfect sandwich. So now we're gonna turn all of this into a dessert. Okay, super easy. So I'm just gonna cut this apple in half. Again, Granny Smith. Just take out the core. Doesn't have to be super pretty. We're gonna fill it. Cut off the bottoms a little bit, just so it stands. Perfect. Into our baking dish. Now I'm gonna take some of the toasted walnuts we used from the salad and the cranberries. I'm gonna do what we did with the grilled cheese. We're gonna chop them all together so they make that nice little crumbly thing. You can add, if you wanted to add oatmeal to this, you totally could, like a streusel kind of deal. So we're gonna add a little bit of butter to this to kind of bind it all together. All right, so like, I don't know, a couple tablespoons of that. A little bit of honey. Add a little bit of sweetness. It's gonna melt and caramelize too, so you're gonna get a little bit extra richness and flavor. A little bit of salt. Yes, salt in desserts. Please put salt in desserts. Salt brings out flavor in food and it makes it taste like it should. Then a little bit of balsamic vinegar to add a little bit of acid. And I just fill it. Round it right in the center. There we go. Now I'm gonna pop it into a 350-degree oven for about 20 to 25 minutes. And 20 to 25 minutes later. See how nice and soft the apple is? It's gonna be really hot, so be careful. This would be so good with some vanilla ice cream on top or just some heavy cream drizzle on the top. Oh yeah. Mmm. Honey, nutty. It needs ice cream. Now it's your turn. Get to that grocery store, buy the ingredients you love, and get cooking. You can follow me on Facebook and Instagram at Sammy's Kitchen and hashtag #EverydayGourmet to show me your recipes and ask me any questions you may have. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you soon.